again, as we mentioned in our revenue section, we have COVID expenditures of $3.4 million that equate to the reimbursement we expect to get from FEMA and the CARES grant. As you recall, in May we did make a few budget requests to just make sure our staffing levels and our support of our programs and services to our students was adjusted for and added to. We have roughly 3.65 in teachers for our blended expansion and our ESL support. We have 3 additional paras that we hired for our bilingual para support at the high school. We had 2 support staff positions, secretarial and an attendance manager for growing enrollment on the west side of the district. We added 1 substitute for our pre-K program to support any absences that occur due to the demands of and lack of substitutes that are available. And last, we had 1 administrative position as a dean that we added as well. The total of the FTEs is 10.58, and the total of that amount was $629,000. In this slide, we're showing where the FEMA CARES dollars are going to. We have, as you recall, those dollars have been allocated for SEL supports for our students through mental health social workers, behavioral therapists, and mental health counselors at a total of $1.8 million. And we have budgeted $1.1 million for protective equipment and e-learning support. We did hear in the last couple of days that there is a digital equity grant that the state is provided, which is part of what we've used dollars for as we've had to gear up and make sure we've got the right supports for remote learning. So as a caution, we'll see what happens and certainly have expenses that relate to that. So if the FEMA reimbursement does not come through, we do have additional funding that we can use to help prop up this portion of the expenditures. And if we were to receive both of them, then we would come forward with a plan to determine what the best use of those funds, and that will come through Mr. Hyde. So as we project out, the bottom line, the yellow line represents, and between the green and yellow represents what the FY 2020-21 budget. We're expecting for our operating funds revenue of $290.4 million. We're expecting projected expenditures of $289.4 million. So we're approximating about a $1 million surplus of revenues over expenditures that would bring our fund balance to $120 million. This does reflect in the green what we project our fund balance to be, and we did believe that this year, and we don't have the audited financial statements, that we did end up much further ahead with reduced expenditures due to COVID-19. The next 2 represents our operating funds plus the debt service fund and capital projects fund. We have $27.1 million budgeted for debt service. In revenue, 26.9 in projected expenditures, with a slight surplus of 136,000. Capital projects, we have a $3.8 million projected revenue with 12.6 million in expenditures, with a deficit of 8.8 million that's being funded from the prior year fund balance. So overall, we expect to have a $321 million projected revenue, $329 million in expenditures, with $7.7 million deficit that will be paid out of the capital projects fund balance that's available to us. At this point, I just want to highlight some of the District 300 financial information. We do like to compare ourselves in relationship to how we're spending our money. This slide is, the blue slide represents the state of Illinois operating expense per pupil average. The red bar represents District 300's average operating expense per pupil. As you can see in that slide, we are consistently below the state average on what we spend per student versus what the average state of Illinois is. For the 2018-2019, which is the most recent year that we have, the state average was $13,764, and our average cost was $11,963. If we calculated that out, we would receive $37.8 million in additional expenditures if we were to operate at where the state level was. And certainly we could do a lot of more things for our students, but I think we continue to provide excellent opportunities for our students despite our lower average operating expense per pupil. We also like to compare our operating expense per pupil to the other Kane County school districts. The blue up there represents all of the Kane County school districts, and the red bar represents District 300. There's only one school district in Kane County that operates at a lower operating expense per pupil. With the remaining other school districts rating, we are at $11,963, and the next lowest at Elgin is $12,658, and Geneva going to $14,187. And if we spend at the level of Geneva, we'd have $46.7 million more that we would be spending on our students. Last point of financial data that we like to point out, this represents the 2019 tax rate for Kane County. Again, the most recent tax rate that was on the tax bills that went out. The red bar represents District 300. The blue bar represents all the other Kane County. And as you can see, we continue to be one of the lower tax rates in comparison to our Kane County school districts. So the next step, unless you have any questions, later on in the agenda, you'll be asked to vote on the authorization of the 2020-2021 education plan proposed budget.
So are there any board member comments, Mr. Stevens?
I would just like to say that this has been reviewed at several finance meetings, and the Finance Committee recommends its approval.
Any other board member comments? Okay, I have 2 public hearing sheets, and I have 2 people on each one, and I just want to verify, because I see Mr. Tennis there, and he's usually on the one about the budget, but you are on the one for public comments and in general. And Mr. Thomas, you are on the one for the budget. Is that correct? And Ms. Davila, you are on for the budget as well, correct? Okay. In that case, Ms. Davila, please come up to the podium. You must be 18 in order, or have a parent or legal guardian with you. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please give your full name and respectfully state your comments. The board reserves the right to adjust your time period. Please don't mention names of any specific staff members. The board's practice is to listen and to not engage in discussion. So,
thank you. Good evening. This speech is by a colleague organizer, Alisa Cuellar, who could not attend herself, but I am here to help her express her concern in regards to the police resource officers in the district, and this is directly related to the budget. I was a student at District 300 for 11 years. I previously spoke about the harm that comes from allowing students to wear the Confederate flags in District 300 schools, and wanted to talk about a related topic. I wanted to address the board regarding school resource officers. As an educational institution, it should be a priority of the board to understand the historical context of the police. The police as we know them today evolved from slave catchers, which shows that there has always been a culture of targeting black and brown bodies. I'm asking the board to reflect on how they participate in perpetuating the culture of fear to continue within our schools and consider a change in policy before you approve the budget. I know that there has been previous discussions with the board on the role of SROs. Asking SROs to take part in the conversation of the environment they create for students is completely inappropriate, as they will skew the conversation to make them appear in a better light, and it will not allow people to share how they truly feel without fear of retaliation. There has been an emphasis on students to come forward and share their experiences, whether it be racism or negative interactions with SROs. I want to stress how difficult it can be for students to first go through these traumatizing experiences and then expect them to tell them to relieve these experiences in order for things to change. How do you expect the people who had a negative experience with an SRO to come forward when administration has already failed them to address these issues before? Despite this, I will share my experiences as a past student in District 300. I can tell you firsthand that it never made me feel safe seeing a man standing at the entrance of the schools that I attended with several weapons on his belt, staring me down every day. It never made me feel safe knowing that an SRO came from the same department of a previous SRO that was removed for tasing children on camera. When there were rumors of a potential school shooting, I did not once have the thought that the SRO would protect me. It never made me feel safe as a student of color seeing a cop every day. It made me feel uncomfortable. I know that I was not the only student that made me that I was uncomfortable with the presence of a school resource officer in the building. It is my understanding that District 300 does not allow ICE agents into school buildings. However, District 300 not only allows police officers into buildings, but signs contracts with them to ensure that they are paid to stay within school buildings. Police and ICE stem from the same system that is invested in upholding white supremacy. It is important to recognize that this is a commonplace for police departments to actively work with ICE. Taking this into consideration, the environment these SROs create for students with family who are immigrants or are immigrants themselves is intimidating. How is that not hindering on education when students come to school intimidated by authority figures that are not there to protect them but working to criminalize them? I am asking District 300 to cancel the current contracts with police departments. It would save the district. I did not see the budget for police contracts in the presentation, which is worrying. How much money are they spending? I would save the district a lot of money and help the tentative budget for 2020-2021 projected $6 million deficit. Canceling the contract with police departments means that the district wouldn't have to offset $17 million the district has in cash reserves. I'm also asking District 300 to cancel the current contracts with the police departments, mainly because it would benefit the students, it would create a healthier environment, it would have a better emotionally safer school. It would establish a more supportive environment. It would be more welcoming to documented and undocumented families. We do not need repressive tools like tasers, guns, and batons near our youth. The ideal approach would be to work proactively to prevent the use of police force in schools instead of keeping the SROs, thus continuing to support the school-to-prison pipeline. And we save money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas? Same rules apply.
I'm Matthew Thomas, a former student from D300, and I'm here to give a proposal on something that would be able to save the budget some money, and I believe something that we need to change in this district. Good evening, District 300 board members. Currently, there are conversations occurring nationwide in relation to removing law enforcement presence from public schools. Law enforcement in public schools creates a school-to-prison pipeline. There is even evidence within D300 that this school-to-prison pipeline may exist. Hundreds of interactions with the school resource officers have been documented in the last couple years at both high school and middle school levels. And at both levels, arrests have been made. There have been cases of school resource officers being present in elementary school settings, although these cases have gone undocumented. Many schools have already taken action around the country, canceling their contracts with local law enforcement. While we present this discussion to D300 today, it is important that we look at a specific role law enforcement takes within our education. One of the initial introductions to law enforcement occurs as early as elementary school. The Drug Abuse Education Program, also referred to as DARE, is a drug prevention program taught by a local police officer. There are several issues with this program and its relationship to law enforcement. Countless studies have shown that over the years the DARE program is ineffective. Although over the lifespan of the program the curriculum has been changed, studies are still showing that the effectiveness is minimal to none. Since the mid-2000s, nearly 60% of school districts have removed the program. There are a variety of reasons as to why the program may be so ineffective. The class itself is taught by a police officer, an authority figure in the community. When students are taught by an authority figure such as a police officer, there may be a sense of fear within the students, especially students whose families may have had negative experiences with law enforcement. This sense of fear inhibits students' ability to be fully receptive. Additionally, The primary role of a police officer is to keep the community safe through enforcing the law. This individual is not someone who is heavily educated in education, counseling, drug addiction, the mental health field, and even working with children. Instead, a police officer criminalizes drug use, teaching that drug abuse is criminal culture. Drug abuse is not a crime. It is a mental health issue that may be the result of several reasons, such as poor family relationships, poverty, and mental illness. The lack of proper education can lead to misinformation, distorting the children's view on drug abuse and law enforcement. The DARE program is not free. It is estimated that the DARE program costs between $175 to $270 per student and costs the nation between $1.04 and $1.4 billion. This massive amount of funding goes towards a program with little to no efficacy while promoting the presence of police in schools. With the massive cost of the program, there are countless alternative programs and curriculum that are shown to be more effective. The lesson should be taught by a professional trained in drug abuse and counseling to ensure the message is appropriate and the information is accurate. As we continue to have discussions regarding law enforcement presence in schools, I urge the district to reconsider the effectiveness and use of the DARE program. I'm requesting that the board seek better alternatives that do not involve law enforcement, rather individuals from that of a human services background. And I urge D300 to cancel their contract with local law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comments. So we are now closing the budget hearing and moving on with the regular public agenda. We are now on item 7 of our board agenda, which are board announcements. We have a couple announcements to make. Either one, please start.
Sorry, that was my cue. District 300 named one of NICH's 2020 best school districts in Illinois. NICH, an organization that provides ranking for K-12 school districts, colleges, and neighborhoods, has released new rankings for the best school districts in Illinois. NICH has named District 300 as one of the 2020 best school districts in Illinois. Notably, in 2014, NICH ranked District 300 as the 136th best school district in Illinois. In 2020, that same rank is 73rd best district in the state, an improvement of 63 spots. According to the NICH website, the rankings stem from the Department of Education data, student and parent surveys, and other categories. NICH gives each district a numerical ranking and assigns them a grade. Congratulations to the District 300 staff, students, and community who have helped their district achieve this success.
Dundee Crown alumnus named first female general officer in United States Space Force. Last month, Dundee Crown High School alumnus Nina Armagno became the first female general officer in the United States Space Force. Nina, who graduated from Dundee Crown in 1984, was promoted to a 3-star general during a ceremony at the Pentagon. According to the Houston Chronicle, in her role as director of space programs, Nina will oversee the day-to-day events at Space Force headquarters. Prior to her promotion, Nina served as the director of space programs for United States Air Force. According to the Air Force website, Nina graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in June of 1988. Her experience in space systems operations includes combat mission ready operator, instructor, evaluator, and flight commander in strategic missile warning, space surveillance, space control, space launch, and theater missile warning mission areas. District 300 would like to congratulate Nina on this accomplishment.
Thank you. I'm in awe right now as I'm looking at this great example of female leadership. All right, moving on. We are now on item number 8.1, Superintendent Report.
Yeah, Madam President, members of the board. Unfortunately, I'm going to share one more piece of good news that just got sent to me via text message. Unfortunately, it didn't arrive prior to the meeting. But Dundee Crown High School is thrilled to announce that Elliot Soto was just brought up by the Angels, and he will be playing in the majors. He is a product of District 300 and Dundee Crown, so they're extremely excited. So I asked if I could share that tonight, if it was a secret, and they said no, we could share away. So thank you. Congratulations to Dundee Crown. Congratulations to Mr. Soto. This evening's superintendent report, there is a slight change. At this time, I'm going to bring Adrian Harris, the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, to the podium. He'll provide a brief overview. He's been in district now a little less than a week.
9 days.
9 days. And he has hit the ground running, visiting schools, but he's here to kind of provide you with an update and a summary of his actions to date and next steps. So, Mr. Harris, please go right ahead.
Good evening, school board. Good evening, Mr. Hyde, District 300 community and staff. Obviously, in 9 days, my report will be relatively short. One of the main things that I did want to do upon my entrance is meet with as many principals as possible. I am happy to say at this point, in 9 days, I've been able to meet with 20 of our school principals. And the goal there is to just, if we're going to build community, I need to learn the community, and what better people to learn from than the people that are working in our schools. I've got 4 more scheduled for the rest of this week, and the final 3 will be next week. So by the end of next week, I will have met with all of our building principals. A couple of other news and notes. We are starting a District 300 Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I believe the form was sent out to parents yesterday. We've already got 72 people that have expressed interest. I personally sent out emails to a number of community members last week. My hope is to have a committee of roughly 20 people. If it's too big, you can't get anything done. If it's too small, you don't have multiple opinions at the table. So our plan right now is to start meeting in middle of October, and we'll meet at minimum once a month moving forward. The goal of the committee will be to work together to figure out how we make all of our schools safer, better, and more equitable for all of our students. Couple of other notes. I have already met with Mr. Lentz, the principal at Algonquin Middle School. We are and have revamped the process to change the mascot of Algonquin Middle School. The plan is to start, obviously depending on tonight and how the vote goes, but we're planning on starting the process at the end of this month or middle of October, with a plan to have a new mascot prepared by March to introduce to the board and then to the community. So we should be able to launch by the beginning of next year. Last but not least, there was the question about changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, which we don't feel will be a problem, but right now this year, with it being in 2 weeks, we don't really see that as being an option. The plan right now is to have that done and changed for the beginning of school for next year. So that's all I have for us tonight. I'm open for any questions. So,
Board members, Mr. Stevens.
I would just like to say welcome aboard. We're glad you're here. We've needed this position for a long time. And I applaud Mr. Hyde for creating and filling it, and look forward to working with you.
Look forward to working with you as well.
And as you can see, we have active community members that will more than likely either you will reach out to or they will reach out to you throughout your process.
I plan on working with them very closely. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Fiorentino, did you have something to say? No? Okay.
So one quick update just for the general public's recollection. The Algonquin Middle School mascot has to be revisited because of a change in state policy and law. It's not simply, something that others would classify as a under political correctness. It is a mandate under state policy that any school that has a mascot or an emblem involving a Native American tribe must either work collectively and collaboratively with that tribe, gain approval, and then incorporate several academic and other strategies within the building, or they must change their mascot. As the board and community have known, I've stated this repeatedly, that we have made multiple attempts to reach out to someone. We did have an individual reach back out to us. They contacted Ms. Keys, so I'll be following up with them, because apparently they are working with legislators, and they actually have some connections with local Native tribe leaders that might be able to assist us if we chose to go that route as well. Mr. Harris was not aware of that, so this is the first he's heard of it. So I just want to remind people that that's not just something we're doing on a whim. It is a mandate from the state of Illinois. Any questions? Okay. Moving forward, we get to the segment of tonight's presentation. We revisit, and the board will take action this evening on our in-person and remote options moving forward. As a reminder for the board, for staff, and for community members, there are actually 3 options. However, 2 options have to go hand in hand for the elementary school. That option is the 8A B-Day hybrid. And I'll get into the description of that in a moment. But then option 3 provides the fully remote option, and you can see why the two have to go with each other, because you can't have one without the other to provide families with a true choice there. The second option is the half-day option, and again, I will go into details here. For option 1, the 8A B day, it's the hybrid. Students would attend 2 days per week in person, 1 day per week as an entire class remotely, synchronously with their teacher, and then 2 days per week they would have asynchronous assignments. We have reviewed the pros and cons previously. It does allow for students to maintain some contact with in-person instruction, allows activities that can't be replicated at home, such as labs and other activities. Unfortunately, there are some activities, just to make sure that we're completely transparent. For example, music, orchestra, chorus, those things are still not, and there are prohibited activities to be done indoors because of air quality and other concerns with particulate spread. Those things can be done in larger areas or even outdoors, but again, given Illinois and our climate, those are limited opportunities for outdoor sessions. The cons, it adds an additional asynchronous day of learning for students, and that has been a concern amongst many of our parents, especially early primary parents, and it would require students to be reassigned to new teachers. There is no way to accommodate students to be in person and or fully remote without restructuring all of our classrooms, and I believe we've been very clear about that. The second option, again, that goes concurrently with option 1 is option 3, which is a fully remote option. This is slightly different than our current remote education plan. Students would attend synchronously each day with their assigned teacher 5 days per week, and there would be no further asynchronous day. Pros, it does allow for remote instruction each day. It ensures that students don't miss instruction regardless of illness, because again, unlike in person, the student would be able to remote in, but again, if you recall, we addressed that as well for even in-person students. It does require students to be rescheduled with new teachers and possibly students from other classes and schools. I think what oftentimes got missed, first of all, there's some misconceptions about the initial parent survey that went out last summer. That survey did not have a high response rate, and there were only 2,200 or 2,300 responses that selected remote. That is not an indication that the entire community wanted in person, because again, it was not representative of more than 30% of our overall population, so the sample size was relatively small. However, in this situation, and we were very clear back in June or July that any transition to, again, fully remote or fully in person would require schedule changes. It is incredibly disruptive. It is something for people to consider. And it is something we've been, again, very transparent, have not hidden, and been very direct in our responses and replies to constituents and stakeholders as they've expressed their concerns regarding this. But again, it's not possible to meet both demands and needs simultaneously. The half-day elementary option, this is option 2. It is the separate option, again, outside of options 1 and 3 being approved. Option 2 was the option that we continued to refine. It is basically an option that we were working on, but it does address the vast majority, if not all, of the initial concerns that had been expressed throughout our initial remote learning and even prior to our fully defining or providing all the details in regards to an AB hybrid. It allows students to maintain their teacher. There is no need for either remote or in-person students to have to forfeit that current relationship with the teacher. It allows students who want to be in person on an alternating schedule each day. But even though they'd only be in person on campus half a day, every other day, they maintain daily contact with their specials teachers, their interventionists, their support staff, in addition to which they maintain direct contact with their core instructional teacher. The academic day is slightly shorter than what is currently in our plan and what we currently do with students. That also has been a concern amongst especially early primary parents in kindergarten, first and second grade, that the length of day, arguably inclusive of screen time, even though we provide multiple breaks throughout the day, is not appropriate for younger students. And so again, comprehensively, this addresses a lot of issues and concerns. The biggest cons here is it does potentially create scheduling issues for families, not students. So families may find that the half-day schedule is not conducive to their work schedule and other type of childcare needs that they may have. It does not replicate the traditional school day schedule. It eliminates lunches and recess time by putting that time in the middle of the day to allow for transportation. It does require that we abbreviate our direct instructional time with students dedicated to core content areas, but it still includes some portion of asynchronous learning each day. However, that is appropriate. That would arguably be considered to be homework and extension of the classroom or assignment where students are practicing or applying what they've learned each day. So there are some considerations here as well as we go through the proposals, and that's the elementary, but I wanted to make sure the board was aware that currently we have 57 staff who are working remotely. Those are largely for a variety of reasons. However, and of those, 19 are specifically within the elementary group. By and large, these are, I would argue, or I would share that these are not due to significant medical concerns. Many of them are due to infant care, very early childhood issues with their own children, and unfortunately they have not been able to find accommodations, and as you know, early childhood care right now is in high demand. We have seen that. We've tried to provide supports for our families and staff consistently, but those 57 staff, and again, 19 of those are elementary teachers. In addition to which, we have 250 staff who bring their children to school with them each day. Schools have set up their own internal strategies for supervising students, and they're age appropriate, and they follow our same expectations with mask wearing and social distancing and hand hygiene and cleaning. And then we also have 200 staff who, along with many of our families, participate in the child care opportunities that we provide through our child care providers. All of those expire October 9th. The middle school, high school, in-person and remote options. Again, option one is that A-day, B-day, in-person hybrid. Students would attend 2 days in person, 2 days asynchronously, and then 1 day fully as a class remotely. And again, it provides for a full remote option. Again, these have to be approved and denied as one. Option one, I've already addressed this with the elementary schedule. There's really no difference between the two. Option two, again, same thing, fully remote option was addressed previously. I shared all of the details with that involved with the elementary plan. It does allow for hands-on tasks, although I will say for the board's sake, starting Monday is the first day we actually return students to campus for career tech ed and lab activities. That's been incredibly well received by both staff and students and families. They're very excited. So students who are in autos, I actually got some pictures sent to me this evening from our students in the autos classes and welding and other career tech ed. That will continue to expand. It is a process that we have to follow because of routing and transportation and other things, but that will continue to expand in the present situation to be more inclusive of students potentially in the fine arts and or in the sciences to allow for those labs and activities to take place as well. They are not limited to just asynchronous Fridays. Those students are attending on a rotation every day. We do limit the number of students that are allowed on campus so that we can address any safety concerns and, again, have a slow integration process, but allow those students, more importantly, to do those hands-on activities for those classes that are most important to them. McHenry County data, so each time I've presented, we provide the weekly updates from each one of our counties. Although we touch 4 distinct counties, only 2 of which house our schools, both McHenry County and Kane County. McHenry County, thank you, Mr. Fiorentino, for actually sending me and forwarding me. We do not receive regular updates from McHenry County because we have a limited interaction with them. However, they have proposed new metrics for school operating, for schools to safely make decisions about their operating. While McHenry County and Kane County both maintain very, very good dashboards for schools to make decisions, they're one of the first to apply metrics across the board as to what data would support fully remote, hybrid and in-person and or fully in-person. This has not been finalized, this has not been approved, and there is nothing like this for Kane County at this time. I did forward this to our ROE and to Kane County staff to inquire as to whether or not they were developing something similar, and we haven't received their response yet. So McHenry County data, just as we indicated before, we do track and monitor, and again, many of these are the same criteria that are highlighted here in the McHenry County metrics. We look at test positivity rate, we look at new cases per 100,000, we look at hospitalizations, youth case increases, and you will see here on this screen for last week, this data ended on Friday. We had 2 areas that were considered moderate risk. That is the test positivity rate and the new cases per 100,000. New cases overall were in a minimal concern category. Youth case increases were also in a minimal category. There have been, in Kane County Health Department reported that there have been increases in the number of positive COVID cases, for students between the ages of 11 and 19. However, if you look at that and you look at specific zip codes, most of those occur, if not all of those occur outside of District 300 zip codes. Carpentersville does have a slight spike, but nothing that has created an indication for McHenry County or others to indicate that there's a concern with youth cases at this time. Again, these are hospital bed utilizations, number of reported instances where somebody has had COVID or COVID-like symptoms. Again, hospitalizations, ICU units, all of these fall within the minimal or target ranges at this time. Here again, really more importantly, if you looked at those McHenry County metrics, if we were to try and apply those, what they look at right now is what's happening over a 14-day period of time, and that's reflected here. You're seeing a decline. While it was pretty much right at the warning level, it has subsequently declined over the last 2 weeks. You see the same decline indicated here for the last week under the case rate per 100,000. We have to acknowledge that there are significant fluctuations in test data. Some weeks we seem to see incredible spikes because there's far more testing that was done. That is especially true after long or holiday weekends. And so there is some inconsistency in the data and its reporting. In Kane County, the same metrics are followed for us. You see here again, the first two are indicative of having a moderate risk or being coded yellow because there is some, some concern, and it gives us pause to make sure that we're tracking and monitoring test positivity and new cases. Our youth case increase here in Kane County, you can see here at the bottom, is a little bit higher than what it was in the McHenry County slide deck. Again, here, all three or all four of these categories when it comes to or hospitalizations, hospital visits, ICU units, are all falling within the target ranges for students, or for school districts, excuse me. Again, test positivity, you see here in Kane County, we do see a 1 week kind of stagnation and then a decline, but a decline overall over a 3 week period of time. We see the same decline here over a 1 week period of time. I think if there's any concern, it's this up and down that we typically see. I think some of that's inherent in the amount of testing that's done and when and how data is reported. Overall, in our region, so there's a third dashboard that we track and monitor, and that is the regional dashboard. We are in Region 8, and I made sure that we tracked all the way back to August because I think it's important to show that we have had a steady line as far as test positivity. Yes, there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be spikes. However, overall, if you recall my initial concerns in June or July about holiday weekends and seeing the potential spikes that we were hearing about and being, basically warned about, we do see kind of a steady path here. Also for hospital admissions, again, going back all the way back to August 15th, we again see through September, we again see some pretty significant status, meaning relatively unchanged. Internal data, and I have to admit that that is too small for me to see. Ms. Harkin, if you'll remind me, I know we have 9 total positive cases in our school district. This is specifically related to staff, but I believe there were 168 or 163 total incidents, if that's correct. I'm going to rely on somebody else's better eyes than mine because I don't have it. Oh, it's behind me. 163. Yes, I forget that there's a screen behind me. So just for clarification for the board and community, anytime someone reports or calls into school saying, I'm not feeling well, I have symptoms, we require them to stay home. They then follow up with subsequent testing. Out of 163 COVID-related or possible COVID events, we have confirmed only 9 positive tests. Of those positive tests, none have a correlation or connection back to the school district and or the school environment. The same is true for our student positive cases to date. Some of that potential obviously is due to the fact that students aren't in school. So there's always that chance, but right now students, even student athletes, most of the time what we're finding, if not all of the time, and I don't know if Ms. Schmidt has stayed here with us this evening, have been reported to be outside activities, parties, gatherings. Students, in many instances, they've kind of been their own cohort amongst their peers. And then someone new is introduced to the group. So, for example, I know that when we had the cases at Hampshire, it was related to an older sibling who was visiting or had returned from college, I believe, was what we were told. And that student, unbeknownst to them, had COVID, and that's how our students came in contact with it. So at that point, it wasn't a risky behavior. But the board, as many of our community members have come to know, there's all kinds of videos and things out there of our students attending parties and things of that nature. They're not socially distancing. They're not wearing masks. And it does become, somewhat of a concern, as far as tracking and monitoring. But we do work closely anytime those issues or incidents are reported to us. We don't necessarily track that data. We provide all the necessary information to the Kane County or McHenry County Department of Public Health. They then subsequently interview students and start to do their point tracing and point tracking. And then if there is a confirmation of a case, they then return back to us and share that information. And Ms. Schmidt is our point of contact, the district nurse, for all that said information. So the scheduling option data I'm about to share with you. So the parent choice survey went out. It's by far one of the, it's the best response we've ever received to date. However, just to preface the data, the choice survey is not an indicator of preference. The board received numerous emails from stakeholders saying, yes, I made a selection. However, my preference would be to stay with XYZ. It is designed to collect data solely to inform my team as to what next steps we have to take for the planning process, that should the board take action to approve the recommendations, or excuse me, the proposals before you, that we are prepared and have the necessary data to start planning and adjusting schedules as needed. Overall, we received 14,776 responses. That is after we filtered duplicates. We did allow families the ability to go back in and change their minds. In some instances, we had households where both parents disagreed and both submitted their own responses. We are still having to chase down some of those. We also have situations where children have a divorced household, and so both parents share custodial privileges and rights, and they also may have selected different options. And so we work through many of those. So again, out of the total number of responses, which was well over 15,000, and you'll see that on the next slide, we actually have 14,776 unique individual responses. If you consider, again, excluding pre-K and preschool, we have 19,937 students. That number does vary and fluctuate. You'll see it stated differently in different times because that also integrates or involves some of the charter schools numbers and other factors and outplaced students that may fluctuate. But that response rate, or that total number of responses, reflects 74% of our enrolled students having submitted a response. Not families, because obviously there can be more than one student per family, but that's specific to our student number. The data slides that follow, please, as the board knows, the decision was made to default any non-responses to the remote option. And just as a reminder, the justification for defaulting to remote was that I did not feel that it was appropriate to default someone to in-person, not knowing their specific circumstances. So anybody who has not responded, the schools have those lists because the schools have their school level data. They will begin following up with families, not with emails, not with text messages. They will actually call each individual family to confirm what their selection is. The reason I share all this is that the following data does not include any of those decisions. So please know that the data you're about to see is not skewed by remote learning options and those types of things that people defaulted to. So at the elementary school level, we received 6,661 total responses. We have 8,353 elementary age students. The percent of our enrollment that responded was roughly 80%. At middle school, we had 3,372 responses. We have 4,765 middle school students represented. That constitutes approximately a 71% response rate. At the high school level, we have 4,743 students or responses, and we have 6,637 total students at high school. Again, a 71% response rate. Once again, this is not an indicator of preference. It's simply an indicator of a choice that they made. This is the total district-wide number of counts. The board has this in their packet. So this reflects, again, the total number of responses. This is K-12, and that is why the board will see here option 2 is reflected, even though that's specific to the elementary schools. But comprehensively, in its totality, those are still included in the overall count. For middle school, you see here, this first column, we have that number of responses for an AB hybrid. You also see here the total number of responses, 890 responses for students and their families who indicated an interest in staying or attending remotely. For our high schools, you see, again, a total number of 3,475 responses for the 8A, B-Day hybrid and 1,188 responses for remote learning. So looking ahead, additional options and or considerations regardless of board action this evening. Just so everybody understands that we have not sat idly by. Our plans have continued to change and revise. I believe we're doing an excellent job of punting every time we're faced with another unique challenge. I think this week also, if the board, just pointing this out, not a political commentary by any means, but I think yesterday was another great example of where we oftentimes get conflated or confusing or contradictory information. The CDC initially released information and then almost immediately retracted it, saying that was a mistake. Those types of things create a great deal of concern, because they have been inconsistent, and many times they have been in conflict, and that was the reason why we decided to open in remote, was not because of local case numbers solely. We had concerns with the possibility of spikes in the future. However, our primary concern was the inconsistencies and our inability to meet the expectations and guidelines and mandates. So moving forward, we will continue to evaluate the use of possible vacant locations. There are vacant properties, storefront properties, stores, for example, Spring Hill Mall may have a vacant store. Is that an appropriate alternative setting for us to put maybe a secondary campus or something on, so that we can continue to provide an in-person option, reduce the number of students on a physical campus, a traditional physical campus, but that's just something we have to explore. For complete transparency, it's going to be incredibly costly because you have to build out the space, and there's no guarantee that while it has been approved for use for commercial property, that there is no guarantee it will meet the school code requirements for safety, fire, hygiene, and those types of things, because we're mandated to have a certain number of restrooms per, there's a ratio. There are certain fire codes and things that may not apply, or that may apply to a school setting that may not apply in other settings, so we have to explore that. We'll also continue to review the possibility of developing in-person satellite campuses. So one of the things that we had considered and we continue to plan is if the board, for example, were not to take action this evening, we would continue to look for opportunities. For example, if we have enough interest and we have staff who are interested, could we create a fully in-person elementary, middle school, and or possibly high school campus? That's something we have to explore. There's a great deal of conversations that still have to take place. Obviously, we have to engage our union membership and union leadership, but these are the types of ideas that we continue to try and work through and problem solve in order for us to try and provide opportunities to return students to in-campus while adhering to the specific and strict guidelines that we have. We'll continue and we will review the first quarter data to identify students who are failing 2 or more classes for possible in-person supports and schedule. We talked about this back in July, that we would start to phase our students back in. And so we have successfully reintegrated our preschool students. We've successfully reintegrated our self-contained special education students. While I'm sure there continue to be some interactions that we continue to have to work with students for mask wearing and things of that nature, it is getting better each day. We continue to work and have conversations with those staff to address any points of frustration and or concerns that they have. Ms. Nackey, Mr. Williamson, and others, countless others, continue to be part of those conversations. We have town halls with our staff to talk through these things and address their questions. But it is important for us to identify within that population of students who may be failing multiple classes, who may potentially have a 504, an IEP, or who's an EL learner. So there's a tiering that takes place. So as I said, we brought in our youngest children, we brought in our most fragile students who are self-contained special education, and now there's an opportunity as grades are being populated for us to identify additional students to encourage to bring in person for supports. The process for that, meaning the frequency in which those students may be on campus, ultimately could be daily, it could be 2 days a week, it could be 3 days a week. Those conversations have yet to be finalized. The last thing is finalizing our plans to return our Tier 3 students. So in addition to our preschool and in addition to our self-contained students, we do have students in DREAM. We also have students in ALOP, and there have been requests for us to accelerate their return to school so they can continue to receive those social, emotional, and other supports. So those students, again, irrespective of the board's decision after this presentation, those students will still be a focus for us to return. And I think it's important for us to make sure that everybody understands that we continue to move forward and we continue to focus on our students. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to ask board members if anyone has any comments, but I do also remind the public that we may take off our masks to speak, and so if you see someone taking off their mask, that has already been approved. And so I'm going to just start this time with Dr. Scarpino.
Thank you. During the age of COVID, parents and students have undertaken new challenges. One of these is how school is taking place in their household. While this new educational setting is not what anyone is accustomed to, asked for, nor wanted, it is my belief that it is the safest and that school is taking place. Teachers have also undertaken a new challenge. I have personally witnessed science lessons, cooking and foods class, physical education activities, mathematics and history classes being taught. When speaking with these teachers and others who teach a variety of subjects, I am hearing of the hours it is taking them to prep for the next day's lessons. I am also hearing how many have developed meaningful educational relationships with their students. While remote learning is not perfect, I believe that students and teachers are getting into a rhythm. Changing in 17 days would upend what has been developed since the start of the school year. With the potential of some students getting new teachers and vice versa, it is my belief that that change is not in the best interest of students and teachers. While this new method of school and teaching is not ideal, parents, teachers, and students are meeting this challenge. I believe it is the safest at this point in time. Since no one can accurately predict what is going to happen next with COVID, I believe it is in the best interest of the students and employees to maintain what we are currently doing for second quarter with one modification that I will address later. In other words, leave the current remote learning system in place, and then the board can re-examine this for second semester. If we wait, we would then be able to see if the beginnings of cold and flu season has any effect upon the numbers, and in the meantime, avoid the disruption of changing to in-person or hybrid with the very real potential of returning to remote if and when the numbers spike. Now for the modification I mentioned. During my 40-plus years in the education profession, I have found the most critical grade levels in a child's education are the primary grades, which include early childhood, kindergarten, first, second, and third grades. This is because children learn how to read in these grade levels, among other things. In grades 4 and up, children read to learn. If at all possible, I ask Mr. Hyde to see a plan developed that would bring back those primary grades as soon as practically possible, with the understanding that the other grade levels would remain in remote learning. The specifics of bringing back the primary grade levels would be developed by Mr. Hyde and his staff, then presented and voted upon by the board. After bringing back the primary grade levels and prior to the start of the second semester, the board and the administration would then reevaluate the possibility of bringing back additional grade levels for the start of the second semester. Thank you.
Mrs. Lamarca?
Well, I guess it's hard to say something that we haven't already said at this point. I just want you to know that your emails are not falling on deaf ears. I've read pretty much every single one of them. More came in as we're sitting here, so I can't say I've read them all. And
I don't have an official tally this time around, but I have to say that it seems to still be running 50-50 as far as what people want. And so as somebody sitting here really wanting to reflect what our constituents really want, because that's why we were elected, it's very difficult. It puts us in a very difficult position. So then we have to just start thinking about other ways of looking at things, and bring that into it. So I just want to say that I actually really agree with what Dr. Scarpino said. It's something that Mr. Hyde and I had talked about last week, trying to work out a plan where we could bring in the K through 3 grades, because I feel like that's definitely the most pivotal. And not that the other grades aren't important, of course, but those are the ones that seem to be, from what I'm hearing and seeing, those are the ones that seem to be struggling, if they're struggling at all. So the thing that probably disturbs me the most about all of this is the high school plan. I struggle with finding the rationale of interrupting kids in the middle of a semester. I can't wrap my mind around that, how that's going to be effective. And yes, full transparency, I have 2 high schoolers, and remote learning is going really well for them. They're both excelling. So I have to also take my parent hat off, of course, and think about the greater good and what other people think. And again, that's where we're seeing reflected and echoed in the emails that we're receiving, the same sentiment that I'm sharing with you now, is that let's just stay the course at least through the end of semester. And again, to echo what Dr. Scarpino said, is that we want to keep things going the way they are instead of disrupting. And the beginning of a semester, especially for our high school students, is a more natural break. They're used to changing teachers, they're used to changing classes, et cetera. So I think, I'm looking at my notes here, I think everything else I said would just be that I wanted to say would just be a repeat of something I've already said at some point, or something that Dr. Scarpino has already said. So I'll keep it brief tonight.
Mr. Stevens?
Thank you. I would like to say that regardless of how the final vote comes out, it is absolutely not a reflection on either lead in the teachers or Mr. Hyde and the staff that have put this plan together. We know that they have gone above and beyond to come up with this plan, and no one ever predicted that this kind of a thing would happen. And so no one should take this as a rebuke of the staff or of the teachers. I will tell you that in my opinion, this is not the appropriate time to change for many of the reasons that both Dr. Scarpino and Ms. LaMarca said. It's in the middle of a semester. We don't know what the impact of flu is going to be. I don't like the teacher shuffle. I know it's unavoidable, but I'm not crazy about the teacher shuffle. I don't like an increase in asynchronous learning. I know that there's a lot of concern about having to commit for the whole year, and yet I understand why that would be necessary. I too would like to see K-3 go back if the parents are willing and have an option for them to stay remote for those parents who are not comfortable. I understand the importance of the K-3. And then, as Mr. Hyde had talked about, other groups of students that were brought back individually and slowly assimilated back. I would like to see if we could do something like that, but at this point, other than K-3, I would like to see us stay the course at least through January. Thank you.
Mr. Fiorentino.
Yes, good evening to students, community members, and staff, both here and in your homes. I'd like to thank Mr. Hyde and the entire team for this updated and both thorough and thoughtful presentation on the very challenging options for our educational system in District 300. I would also like to say thank you, a big thank you really, to so many students, parents, teachers, and staff for your honest and heartfelt messages. I read each one of them, felt your passion and your commitment to your children. The hundreds of messages allowed me to gain perspective around what a struggle we are all having. Although I was touched and affected by the many personal testimonies, as a member of the board and as a person that comes out of the science and research profession, I place great emphasis on the data, research, and science regarding this pandemic. So I study and read about this pandemic daily. I talk to healthcare friends, and we've also witnessed the data that Mr. Hyde provides to us both at board meetings and on a weekly basis. So I've come to my decision after meeting with educators, elected officials, community members, pastors, students, and even grandparents. So I thank many of you for your calls and for sharing your perspectives, especially those that took the time to call me and we talked in person. Last but not least was the important information that Mr. Hyde just presented that we received from thousands of you. And it just goes to show you what type of engaged community we have, that 75–80% of our community completed the survey, and obviously was extremely supportive of a hybrid model. I appreciate the options before us and believe we can move forward in faith of our staff and reopen in a hybrid format. By no means are these great or perfect choices, yet we do have to make choices and decisions tonight. The following is a quote that I noticed from Mr. Hyde as he addressed one of, I think, hundreds of messages, and he said, "We have clearly outlined our policies and procedures relating to the COVID pandemic. These practices have repeatedly shown that we can mitigate the spread and exposure. Every instance of COVID-19 to date, both in D300 and outside of our district, has been attributed to challenging decision-making and practices outside of the school setting. Our policies and practices are working and do support a safe environment for students and staff." So as I look around our area and our region and nation, as well from hearing from family all over the globe, there are more examples every day of successful hybrid in-person learning models. However, I do plead to our community, our parents and students, to continue to make good and safe decisions, as we must continue to mitigate risk and protect each other. So I'm confident in our staff that they can fulfill our teaching and learning objectives to deliver a rigorous and robust education at all levels. I understand it has not been easy under the current climate and will continue to be harder and more work than ever. To that end, I ask the community to be kind and patient to our educators. This continues to be new, challenging, and not without great issue. In conclusion, I believe schools and staff are ready to have in-person learning. I know you may be scared and appreciate and acknowledge these feelings. This may not be the best for all and therefore may have chosen a remote learning model. I remain committed to finding ways to return students and staff to in-person instruction as soon as the administration believes it to be safe. We will continue to make adjustments to our deliverables as circumstances warrant, and I continue to suggest to all our community to do what's best for you and your family. I remain humble and proud to serve each one of the D300 community members and hope and pray our decisions are met with open hearts, open minds, and full of grace. Thank you.
Ms. Detler.
Well, I mean, I've said over and over again why I'm hesitant to go back to in-person schooling, and nothing has changed. In fact, my hesitancy has grown because of something that Mr. Hyde mentioned earlier with the inability for us to trust what's coming out of our most valued medical and scientific agencies. And the latest iteration is having had the recommendation, or at least the guidance from the CDC, I consider the real CDC, that there is aerosolization of the virus, and it changes the game as far as I'm concerned. That information was pulled off the CDC website because of politics, I believe, and until we can be sure of what we're dealing with and what science is telling us and medicine is telling us, I don't know how we can actually be completely able to say that we're confident that we have the ability to protect our kids and our staff. That is not a slam on the administration. I think we have the single best administration in this country for dealing with this the way it's been being thrown at us every other day. I have complete confidence in Mr. Hyde and his team and the teachers of this district. I am just concerned that they're not getting all the information they need to be able to play the game the right way. I'm going to vote to stay remote. Not happy about it, but I'm also, again, and people are mocking me about this online, I don't care. I'm afraid for the future if I'm right and if the science is right. So that's why I'm voting to stay remote.
Ms. McNicholas?
Yeah, thank you.
Respectfully, there's a period for public participation. Please don't make comments from the audience.
Ms. McNicholas?
Thank you. I almost wish, Dr. Scorpino, I could ask you to just pass your speech down. That is exactly what I'm feeling right now. I'm voting for the plan tonight that I believe is the safest for our students, our staff, and our community. I share the same concerns about that Mr. Stevens shares about asking our families right now to choose remote for the rest of the year. I know why we have to do this. I understand the logistics of it. I don't think there's a flaw in the plan, but I do think that it's inappropriate to ask our students or our families and our students right now to choose what they're going to be doing in May. That's one of my biggest concerns. The second is that we don't have the data from what we're told is going to be a really rough fall. We are being told that we should expect cases to spike. We're being told that cases are going to be confounded with flu season and cold season. I'm worried that what's going to happen, and I'm almost certain what's going to happen, is that if we vote to reopen, we will be pushed back remote, whether or not we want to, and that our continuity of instruction will be greatly damaged by the fact that we chose to go remote. We chose to go in person. We had to reassign students to different teachers, and now we're just remaking the whole thing again when we're forced remote and students have switched teachers at least one time this year. I just don't think that the plan that we have in front of us is safe, as many countless hours as went into it. I have full confidence in the plan that our administration has made, and that when we enact it later in this year, it will best serve our students and community.
Okay. So I have a little bit of a different analysis. I agree with everyone, all of my colleagues' comments. It's like reading all of the emails that we get, and each time you read one in a different perspective, you say, yeah, I get it, I understand. And then you read one that has a different view, and you say, well, yes, I get that, I understand. And so I had to step back and try and determine what was my decision tree, what was my matrix, what makes me, will give me direction here. And I've separated this out into, we have been given matrix measurements, and I'll start with, for example, phase 4 within Illinois government that says if these certain metrics have met, schools can open. We've got the information from King County. We have the information from McHenry County. McHenry County, a little bit more along the lines of a recommendation as well, although it's still in draft form. So I look at what is the role of administration and what is the role of the board. I think the administration's role takes a look at what those metrics are and determines, okay, based on these metrics, we can open the schools. We can have in person because we have met or we have addressed these metrics. We then look at, the plan. We can put together a plan. We can put together the safety measures. It's impossible to have everyone come back. Masks are mandatory. If you don't like masks, if you don't like the law, same with if you don't like social distancing, this board, this district is not the place to focus your dissent on that, because we're not going to change that. We don't have the power to, and if we did, we wouldn't. So that's where you need to contact IDPH, the different county health departments, your government officials. Focus there if you want to change those rules, because as long as those guidelines, call them guidelines, rules, mandates, whatever, we will follow them. So that then brings me to, okay, what's my role? What's our role then as a board member? The district has put together a plan. We've met those requirements to say we're in phase 4. Here's our plan. We can open. That's when I look to parents. And that's where I say, I really believe I don't want to be responsible for your children coming to school if you have concerns, if they are going to be sick. That's not my role. That's the parent's role. To me, a parent is the one to decide to take that risk or not take that risk. As a school board member, I want to be able to give that option to parents. I see our role as a district to provide that option, because if we're going to add additional metrics, criteria to be met before we open the schools, then we need to add them to that list so that we know at what point in time do we meet that criteria. We can't keep going back and forth. If that is going to be a criteria to say we need to wait to see what happens with flu season, then make that a criteria so we know when it's met. As it stands right now, we've met that criteria. We've provided a plan. I think it's a parent's choice to decide to take the risk, to send their kids or not. I don't feel that it is my role to step into a person's home and say, your child should not go to school because I am afraid someone will get sick. I am incredibly afraid someone will get sick. But parents need to be the ones taking that risk. If you read all of the emails, the comments, each child is unique, is special. Each family circumstance is different. So my preference is, play it safe, stay home. But me as a school board member says, we've met that criteria in phase 4. It says open schools. We need to provide a plan for opening schools. We need to tell parents the choice is yours. We're giving you a safe choice to stay home, or we've given you options to send your children to school. I have faith that our administration has not presented us plans that are set to fail. I think they're going to do whatever they can to make them work. Even if we have to go back to remote and back in and back to remote, until that criteria changes that says we don't need to have a plan for in-person, I think we have to have the plan. I think we have to go and give the parents an option. And again, masks are mandatory. You don't like them, don't send your kids to school. Send emails off to ISBE, the governor, or someone else, because sending me emails that you don't want to wear the masks isn't going to make a difference. Sending me emails saying social distancing, don't want to do that, isn't going to make a difference. We can't bring all the kids back to school. You don't like the rules, focus on the place that can make changes. You want to follow what the rules are that we have established, and you're comfortable, we're going to provide an educational in-person option for you. Okay. Anyone else have questions or comments? All right. We're going to move on our agenda. Any legislative update?
No, ma'am.
Public participation. I have two people who have signed up for public participation. And same rules apply as before. We're going to start with Mr. Tennis. Please come up. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. The board doesn't usually entertain into discussion. You've been here before, you know the rules. Welcome.
Thank you, Board. My name is Mike Tennis, a resident of Sleepy Hollow for the last 33 years. The purpose for me being here this evening is to address Agenda Item 13.2, approval of the Master Facility Plan. The administration is recommending approval for a $26.7 million 2021 summer capital projects list, which is the first year of a 4-year master facility plan that totals over $100 million. This follows over $24 million spent in the last 2 years. The 2021 request includes flooring replacement and abatement for 4 schools, roofing for Dundee Crown, and about half of the $36.9 million proposed for a new elementary school in Hampshire. Along with the proposed new elementary school, the 4-year plan includes over $23 million for a Dundee Crown High School addition in the 4th year. Capital expenditure decisions are usually driven by the need to A, replace existing aging infrastructure, and B, expand capacity. A planning guideline for determining the cost to replace existing infrastructure in the operations is the operation's current rate of depreciation adjusted upward for inflation. District 300's last audit report for fiscal year end 2019 indicated an annual expenditure rate of $6.2 million. Using that depreciation rate for a 4-year master facility plan, you might expect to spend about $25 million plus for inflation. What the administration is proposing is to plan on spending almost $37 million for a new elementary school and another $23 million for a high school addition, suggesting $60 million is needed for expanded capacity. Do you really want to accept the administration's $100 million master facility plan, including spending $26.7 million in 2021? Do the demographics really support planning to fund that kind of expenditure? In District Finance Committee meetings, I have heard of the need to catch up for the past years when more money should have been spent on bricks and mortar. But keep in mind, $24 million was spent just in the past 2 years. While I don't claim to have a working knowledge of the district's facility needs, given current economic conditions, you would be well served to request the administration reevaluate the $26.7 million for 2021 summer capital projects, as well as the $100 million master facility plan. Taxpayers should expect that from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Cronin. And Mr. Cronin, you heard the
Yep.
Okay.
First time here, and I didn't realize I should have had prepared statements.
Not everyone does.
So, thank you. So what brought me here tonight was the survey, and jokingly, death was not an option from the two choices we were given. And what prompted the frustration was having to make a decision now that's going to impact June, May, the ideas. With the fluidness of the situation and the guidelines being changed on a consistent basis, I don't feel comfortable having students go now and making a decision for where they will be in the spring. I have a sophomore at Jacobs and two seventh graders at Westfield, one of which has a 504 plan being evaluated for IEP, and has, among other learning disabilities, executive functioning, where structure and continuity are imperative to her learning. And to rip up her teachers, her environment, and to give her new teachers now, and then have to have them read the 504 plan to start implementing that, is going to set back her education. It's going to be too disruptive. Back in July, when we watched a board meeting via YouTube, the plan was to review this quarter by quarter to provide flexibility and to be nimble based on the new recommendations. I agree with the board members that spoke up and said, maybe now in 16 days is not the time to do this. Let's get more data. For in-person learning to be successful, not only do the students have to participate 100%, but parents and the community have to have 100% compliance for this. I was thinking, how can I articulate that on my drive over when the folks out front were making my case for me? There was no social distancing and there was very little mask wearing out there. I don't trust my fellow parents to make a right decision that's going to impact me. By making a choice now for the next 6 months, I'm telling my children, choose between having Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays with your elderly high-risk grandparents, or go into school. I don't feel comfortable keeping them home when things may get better come January. We don't know what that holds. My 3 children are actually excelling at the video school. We have a couple tech issues here and there. We've had to turn in some Chromebooks here and there. But 2 of the 3 are actually doing very well and getting better grades than they were in person. And I think that is a commitment or a testament to the teachers who are doing a wonderful job being given this unique situation and have come through. The teachers are really the stars here, and the students are doing well. But for the system to work back to school fully, I don't feel the parents are going to be compliant. There's consistent stories of people sending kids to school sick. What's going to happen if somebody in my child's class does have COVID, or if the sniffles and parents send them? It hasn't been articulated what we're going to do if somebody in a class is sick, and it may only be the flu, but do we keep everybody home? It just seems that there's too many variables now, and we should continue to look at this on a quarter-by-quarter basis with the goal of eventually getting back, but it's too disruptive in the current environment. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Okay. We are on item number 11. This is consent items less than $25,000. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. McNicholas,
Aye.
Lamarca,
Aye.
and Zettler.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, item number 12, this is consent items greater than $25,000. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
And Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Stevens,
Aye.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Zettler,
Aye.
Lamarca,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
McNicholas.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we're under 13. These are roll call action items. 13.1 is the approval of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Dr. Scarpino, call the roll.
Stevens,
Aye.
Zettler,
Aye.
McNicholas,
Aye.
Lamarca,
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we're on item 13.2, approval of master facility plan for the summer of 2021 projects, design and construction management.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Scarpino, any discussion, sorry. Okay, Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Zettler.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Can I sneak something in real quick? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that the community understands that we have a fantastic construction and facilities group in this district that goes out of its way to not only make sure the job is done right, but make sure they do it with the biggest amount of savings as possible. They've saved us a bunch of money. They have a great team. The morale on that team is exceptional, and we should be very proud that we have that team under Mr. Opal's direction.
Well said.
Thank you.
Zettler.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Fiorentino.
Aye.
McNicholas.
Aye.
Lamarca.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. We are on the 13.3 is instruction plan for second quarter. 13.3.1 is the approval of elementary option 1, which is the AB 2 full days in person, 2 full days asynchronous remote, and 1 day synchronous remote with the option for remote only. I'm going to make a motion to approve that. Is there a second? Okay, if we don't have a second, the motion is going to fail. Is there a second? Okay, so that motion fails. We're going to go on to 13.3.2. This is approval of elementary option 2, half-day rotating in-person and synchronous with option for remote. And again, I'll make that motion to approve. Is there a second? And again, is there a second? Okay, let's try this. 13.3.2, I'm going to modify the motion to be approval of elementary option 2, half-day rotating in-person and synchronous with the option for remote for kindergarten through 3rd only. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion?
Is that possible, Mr. Hyde?
Within option 2,
Yes.
by specified time,
K3?
K3, specified date of start,
Second quarter.
second quarter, it is attainable. It's going to take some logistical effort on our behalf to finalize transportation and work through the metrics, but yes, it's attainable.
Wait, so that's going to operate as I didn't understand, as option 2?
No, I thought it was
That is
3.
option 2. You're modifying, the motion is the modification of option 2.
Okay.
Instead of a K5 initiative, it would be a K3 initiative. That's what I'm understanding.
Yes, that's what my motion was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion on that? Any other clarification on that?
I need clarification.
I need clarification. So if we were to approve this, you would bring K3 back on the half-day rotating.
That is correct.
That's option 2, but not through K through 5.
The recommendation's K3 is what I'm hearing is the
No,
motion.
the K5 failed.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm saying.
So
The K3
based-
is the motion.
Right. Based on what I heard from board members regarding K3, I'm modifying that to say K3.
Is there any option that we could modify option 1 to do K3? Because that's what I was under the impression we were doing. My bad for not catching that, but I thought that's what we were doing.
Ann, did you make a motion on that?
Yes.
So I second that motion.
Oh, we already have a second.
Okay.
So we're in discussion right now.
Seconded.
Miss
I
Lom-
did.
Leslie,
But I believe she withdrew her second because there was confusion.
so in that discussion, we are in discussion, and one of the questions that came up is why option 2 and why not on option 1? Mr. Hyde, can you address that?
Well, option 1 for elementary involves both option 1 and option 3 for K through 3. By October 13th, that is the goal, if that's the directive of the board, direction of the board. But respectfully, there's an existing motion on the table and should not segue into another option or another motion. So I would encourage the board to stick to the current motion and before them, address that topic. If that fails, then they can visit another one. I just don't want to conflate multiple issues at the same time.
Okay, so the motion that's on right now is for option number 2 to be modified in the way that it's K through 3 instead of K through 5. Everything else stays the same. We have a first and we have a second.
Correct.
And we're in discussion, right?
And we're in discussion. Mr. Stevens.
Would this be a year-long commitment? Or would this be through January when we look at everything else?
No, sir. Option 2 provides more flexibility than reassigning students in the other options. So yes, it remains fluid.
And as I recall, option 2 maintains current teacher, gives students, parents the option of in-person or remote, but remote with the current teacher. It provides teacher contact every day of the week, some in-person, some remote. I do want to also clarify that when we talk about asynchronous time, that we need to take into consideration part of that asynchronous time has to, or includes synchronous time with art, music, media, and STEM.
Correct.
So the time that students are actually on their own is not that whole asynchronous period of time. Any other discussion?
Can I, Mr. Hyde, earlier you gave as an example, like if we were to go back, stay remote, that you would be able to work on something like this for K, I thought you said preschool through 3 or something as an example. Is this something along the lines of what you were thinking?
I'm trying to understand. I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Sure. I mean, earlier when we were talking, you gave the example that if we were to go remote, or if we were not, not to pass one of these, that you still thought it would be something that you might pursue, where you would look at bringing back certain groups of kids. And the example you gave was, I think, preschool through 3 or something, because of the younger kids.
So we've already returned preschool. The second group would be the Dream Academy students and ALOP students, in addition to which we would pull the DNF reports to identify students with multiple failures and then encourage them to participate, because we'd identify those students as to whether or not they have an IEP of 504 or whether or not they're English language learners, so that we could provide specific supports for them.
Regardless of age or grade.
That's correct.
Okay, so there, you weren't talking about doing something along the lines of what the current motion is, where you would bring, okay. So I just wanted to make sure I knew what you were talking about. So.
Okay. I could be wrong, but the data that we showed a few minutes ago, didn't it show that most of the parents wanted option 1 versus option 2? So I just want to confirm that I'm correct on that, because I actually am locked out of board book right now, so I can't pull it up myself.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So if most of the parents wanted option 1, I guess I feel pretty strongly if we're going to modify, we need to modify the option that they want.
Again, there's a motion before the board.
I understand. I'm
So then
stating my
the way
opinion.
to do that would be to,
Let the motion die and then reissue a new one.
right, so we can let this one go, and then we can do a motion to modify option 1.
But
Right.
but that
We did-
motion would not include any hybrid learning, correct?
What?
What? This is hybrid learning. Option, the motion that's on right
Correct,
now is
but
for option 2.
What Ms. Lamarcker just talked about is then, after we're done with this, to discuss option 1 again.
Correct.
That is hybrid, though. Option 1 is hybrid.
Yes.
My preference is that we not try to modify this. We vote it up or down, and then if we want to recommend a different change for K3, that be a clean vote with Mr. Hyde having a lot of discretion? Well, that's not what we're doing.
Okay, so
To modify these
we have a
options.
first and second. Let's go through, and if we want, then let's vote it down, and then we can talk about what kind of motion we want to go on.
Thank you.
Okay? So please call the roll.
Okay, Miller,
Aye.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Lamarca,
No.
McNicholas,
No.
Stevens,
No.
Zettler.
No.
Motion fails, 3 aye, 4 no.
Okay, so moving on, I heard that you wanted to have a motion to modify, to approve option number 1 for elementary, but for K3 only? So does someone want to make that motion?
I will make that motion. That we modify option 1 for K3 only.
Is there a second? Well, I'll go with a second.
I would like to modify the motion.
Okay.
I would like to approve the return of K3 in the best form possible that Mr. Hyde and his staff can put together and not be bound by what this says.
Okay, so,
Hyde and his staff make that decision.
all right. Leslie, were you the one who made that motion? Who made the motion? This one?
Leslie made the original
That
motion.
motion, and he's amending.
Right.
I'm
So-
trying to amend it. It needs a.
Right. Are you willing to just withdraw your motion and go with,
No, I'm not. I mean.
oh, okay, so then let's just call the roll.
So that was Lamarca, and then who seconded it?
I did.
You did. Okay. So Lamarca,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye, yes.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
McNicholas,
No.
Scarpino, no. Stevens,
No.
Zettler.
No.
Motion fails. 3 aye, 4 no.
Okay, so Mr. Stevens, did you want to make your motion?
I would like to make a motion that would return K through 3 in the best form possible and leave those details to Mr. Hyde and his staff.
I'll second. Any discussion on that?
Yes.
Mr.,
Because we're being a little bit ambiguous. Mr. Stevens, can you explain that? Or were we talking about a hybrid learning model, but it's going to be
I
left up
have
to?
yes, and I appreciate the fact that it's ambiguous, but I think that the options as put forward are very difficult to understand, and I understand why they are that way. I'm trying to make it very simple. My goal is to get K3 back. I have the most confidence in Fred and his staff to do that in the best way possible. And so I don't want to be bound by what's in this document.
Okay, so
I think it will need to be a hybrid because the only way that we can have students come
That's
back
fine.
is going to be a
Whatever
hybrid.
they would
so there would
recommend,
be
I would support.
some form of in-person learning.
Correct.
Which I think the community might be a little confused because several board members talked about not having hybrid learning. So we want to make this very clear that although you're giving it to Mr. Hyde, we're also saying that we'll include hybrid learning for that age group. Is that correct?
What we're saying is, we understand that this is the most at-risk population, K3, in their, I think Dr. Scarpino put it best. If they don't learn to read by third grade, this is one of the things I learned very early in my school district, school board years, is that they don't read the rest of the year, or the rest of their school years. It's very important that they get the basic knowledge that's necessary in K3. So I don't like asynchronous learning, but I understand it may be necessary. And what I'm saying is I have confidence in Mr. Hyde to develop the best plan to affect the most people. And I understand there's a little bit of give and take on that and how it affects other people. And it's not hybrid learning that I'm opposed to. I explained myself earlier, it's all the other things. It's the cold and flu that we don't know how that's going to be. It's the teacher shuffle that would have to take place. And I think we'll have a lot more information available in January. So I'm voting my conscience.
Okay, so to be clear for everyone, this is the motion to approve return to school for K-3 in a timeline and in a manner that Mr. Hyde thinks is appropriate. There will continue to always be a remote learning option, but
Correct.
this will be the option to return K-3
That's
back
what
to
I'm
school.
saying. Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, and I believe we have a first and a second. Okay.
Steve, is there
Any other discussion? Mr. Hyde, if this passes, is this clear to you what it is that would be passing?
It is my understanding that the board's interest, if this passes, is that we find an opportunity to return students K through 3 while maintaining a choice option for our families to either be in person to the greatest extent possible and or remote, to provide flexibility and to do so in a manner that we feel is best supportive of those needs. I'm assuming as well, based off the numerous comments from board members, that maintaining consistency with their existing teacher would also be a preference. But again, I'll operate under those assumptions and return to the board with a recommendation in short time.
I don't know that you have to return with the recommendation as well as much as return to us just with the information of what it will be.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
being approved now.
Yes, ma'am. And respectfully, again, that's with flexibility in case we have to address some staffing concerns, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We want to make sure that we're clear. Okay. Dr. Scarpino, call the roll.
Stevens?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
McNicholas?
Aye.
Lamarca?
Aye.
Fiorentino?
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Zettler?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're done with elementary. Moving on, we are on 13.3.4. This is the approval of the middle school option 1, AB schedule, in-person 2 days per week, 1 full day of synchronous learning and 2 days of asynchronous learning. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, no second, that one fails. I am going to make a motion to approve middle school option 1, AB schedule, in-person 2 days per week, 1 full day of synchronous learning and 2 days of asynchronous learning to begin in second semester. Is there a second? Okay, no second. Then any other options on middle school? All right, moving on to 13.36, approval of high school option 1. Students will be in person 2 days per week, 1 full day of synchronous learning and 2 days of asynchronous learning with option for remote only. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Anybody? Okay, no second. I'm going to make a motion then, approval of high school option 1. Students will be in person 2 days per week, 1 full day of synchronous learning and 2 days of asynchronous learning with option for remote only to begin second semester. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, why are we wanting to make this motion now when we don't know what January will bring, when we can do this in January?
Because I think it's important, from my perspective, I think it's important that we have a plan. I don't think that the plan is going to change between now and then. If we're in phase 3, it'll change. If we're in phase 5, it'll change. But I think this will give our parents, our students, the ability to start planning for second semester. I have concerns about changing midterm, the middle of the semester, with a lot of changes in scheduling. I don't know that the plan is going to change. And I think it's important that we have a plan and start moving towards that plan.
I think everyone would agree, if it is safe and if we're in phase 5, we will get kids back to school as soon as possible, whether it's January or November. I mean, if we went to phase 5, we would reopen our schools.
But we're in phase 4, and I anticipate being
Can
in
I make
phase
my
4.
comment? And for us to now say we're going to make a plan for January that we don't know what it is going to be when we can make that decision come December, I think is foolhardy and disingenuous, and I will vote no on that.
Any other comments?
I just want to say I agree with Mrs. Miller that it's important for parents to have a plan. Decision we just made for elementary school, and that we're trusting Mr. Hyde and his team to make the best decision for the kids. So in other words, you know, to your point, Mr. Stevens, if things get worse, God forbid, and it doesn't look good to send the kids back, Mr. Hyde and his team are not going to force that on us. So to me, what I think Mrs. Miller is trying to get us to do is just have a plan in motion. And I don't want to get in trouble for saying this,
Right.
but now I'm worried because our middle schoolers are in the wind. But I don't think any of us understood what was going on there. But anyway, so back to this, I think it's important that parents have a plan. So I will definitely support going ahead and understanding that if there's changes, I think we've all seen that we're pretty fluid, that things change, and that's okay. We have time, but at least now we know we have a plan, and that's what we're going with.
The way I look at it is if we, and I know I'm repeating what I said, but if we've met those metrics to have an in-person option of coming back to school, we need to have a plan. So that, to me, this is a plan that's presented for when we would have the ability to have our students come back. My personal opinion is that coming back midterm in the second quarter is not the best interest in our students, but having that plan that as long as we've met the metrics to say we can have in-person learning, that we go ahead and we approve the plan so we know what it's going to be come January. Dr. Scarpino.
A point of clarification. Do we know what the wording of the motion is? And I need to hear that because then I have a question for Mr. Hyde.
Okay, my intention is to approval of high school option 1. Students will be in person 2 days per week, 1 full day of synchronous learning and 2 days of asynchronous learning with option for remote to begin second semester.
Okay, my point of clarification, Mr. Hyde, is if this is approved and then we start second semester and things go awry, do we need to then come back and vote again? Because we're giving you permission right now, if it is approved.
Yes, sir. And maybe the best way to respond to this is there is an established timeline that we approved in July for communication to be finalized and made available to parents. September 11th was the first quarter going into second. There is a second date, I believe, in November that provides an adequate timeline for allow us to project forward. There are a lot of factors that may or may not change between now and January. However, the motion, as I understand it, would afford all of our teams time. With respect, one more time, this will not prevent schedule changes. It is important for everyone to understand those classes that are semester-based classes will be unaffected, but those year-long classes may still result in schedule changes, so we're not avoiding that. And in any instance, we actually may be further adding concerns related to that, but, you know, again, I can work within this framework. I do not believe, because if the local metrics change, and for example, if we go back to phase 3, there is no vote. The state would mandate that we go back into remote learning. There's no vote there. But I will still continue to apprise the board, and I think with the directive to begin planning, I will have ample opportunity to return back to the board, identify any potential barriers or concerns, and modify the plan accordingly if need be.
I just want to, because Mr. Stevens made a very good point, I just want to make sure. So if all of a sudden the numbers go up, then you'll keep us informed, but but the metrics, if they change, then we would actually have to.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's not a local decision at that point regionally
Correct.
if our data slides.
Correct. Thank you. I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted that clarification. Okay.
Okay, one more, just to, again, for clarification. So the flip side of that coin is,
Things improve and we could
yeah,
return fully.
exactly. What
That's
if we're
correct.
in phase 5, January
we
1?
don't- then the plan
you
doesn't
don't have to
matter.
vote again, right? I mean,
No.
clearly we're all just back in school and
Right.
everything's hunky-dory.
Well-
That's what I'm voting for.
Well, hang on now. Because here's why. And so we're in a really good spot, and I don't want to interrupt and stop the bus right now, but I want to say this. If things improve, for example, if a vaccine becomes available, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Will the state mandate the vaccine? How does that impact student attendance? How does that impact all of the other things that are out there? So I just urge some caution. If we move to phase 5, we are back in person regardless. That is a mandate. That's the direction the governor and his groups have indicated. Part of that is contingent on the availability of adequate testing, COVID tracking, point tracking, and in addition to that, a vaccine. So if that becomes available, and it's available in enough quantity, and there's two ways to view that, so please understand. Essential workers will be prioritized with any vaccinations, in any vaccination scenario. Firefighters, police department, hospital workers, they will always be prioritized. If there is not an adequate supply initially of the vaccine, what you could see is rather than students be inoculated, you could see educational staff be highlighted as essential workers, and they in turn would get the vaccine. But again, still some unanswered questions there. So I just urge some caution to say, but the answer simply stated is yes. If things improve and we have a green light to move forward, we're going back to in person. But there will still be some cautionary concerns out there that we will have to address as the time when the time comes.
Dr. Scarpino.
Another question, Mr. Hyde.
Yes, sir.
I apologize.
No, sir.
Scheduling, because high school scheduling, as we know, is it's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
If this gets approved, can the counselors start to look at the scheduling now?
Yes, sir.
They can.
Yes, sir.
And then that would afford them a more generous period of time to do this.
Yes, sir.
Thank
That coupled with all of the additional resources we've provided should provide more than adequate time for them to satisfactorily address schedules.
Any other questions?
Would we not be, are our counselors not already working on that? I feel like they're already working on that regardless of whether.
They are. Dr. Schumacher's leading that initiative with our billing principals. And again, that was the importance behind the parent choice option, was that we would get a strong indicator of where they may be and what their interests are. We realized that come January, the board knows what the communications have been from stakeholders, that in many instances, again, I really want to see what's going to happen as we're going into flu season. I'm more reluctant now. I may be more inclined to send my student in person in January. So I think we would have to still go back at some point in November, December, and gather information again. However, we would have more than enough timeline.
Does this provide any guidance that your staff does not already have?
No. It provides additional time. It addresses the issue of changing teachers mid-quarter, mid-semester.
Right, but our motion right here, if we approve this, does that provide you with anything different than if we did not?
I think it gives direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for, and I don't want to speak for our union leadership, but I think in any instance that we can provide a definitive expectation for January, we should, right? I think that's the concern that's being expressed most frequently is what's happening next. So I think to the greatest extent, if we can provide those bumpers, for people to rely on, and knowing that we provide regular updates as to the progress being made, I think that's a good thing. So I think for staff, to your point, yes, it does provide us something we don't have now. It eliminates the ambiguity.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, given that, I can state an opinion right now, right? Okay.
Yes.
Given that, I just want to state that my biggest problem was asking parents to commit, and again, I understand the logistics, we had to do it that way, but asking parents to commit now to what they're going to do in May, and I think that that's a lot more reasonable than ask for January than it is for right now.
Okay.
So I'm going to muddy the waters.
Can we vote on the motion as it's?
Well, no, because I'm Mrs. Lamarca made a comment. Oh, where does this leave middle school then?
Well, I think you can make a subsequent motion.
Either that, or can I amend the motion to say middle school and high school?
It's your motion.
You could try to amend it.
It's your motion.
It's your motion.
So I'm going to amend the motion to include middle school and high school, middle school in with all of that. Is there a second on that?
I second it.
Any discussion? Mrs. Eller?
Just so I'm clear, so starting in January.
Correct.
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 I understand what you're trying to do. I support getting kids back to school as soon as possible. I just don't think we should be voting on something for months from now, but I hear what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Our goal is certainly to get kids back in school.
Our goal, so my goal here is, yes, to get kids back to school, give our staff time to make the plan so we know what's going to happen in January, as long as we continue to make the metrics for having a hybrid for kids to come back, and moving in that direction. Yes, Mrs. Eller.
I just think I'm comfortable with that option because I think we're going to know a heck of a lot more in January than we know now.
And I think what will happen is the information that we know in January, at least we'll already have our plan. And if we can move forward with this, the planning parts and the students' parts will not be a scramble at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll always continue to have, as long as we're not in phase 5, option for fully remote. Yes, Mrs. McNicholas.
So since we just amended this to talk about middle school, I would like to highlight grades 4 and 5.
I'm sorry, what?
Grades 4 and 5 now are.
Okay, let's get this one done because this one is in January. And it's a different, because it's a different hybrid option. But that is a good point. We'll come back to that one. So any other discussion? Right now it's high school, middle school, this option here. Students will be in person 2 days per week, 1 day full synchronous, and 2 days of asynchronous learning with option for remote beginning second semester, provided all of the matrices are correct, that we can have an in-person hybrid option beginning then. Is that clear? Okay, any other questions, comments, modifications? I believe we have a first and second. Dr. Scarpino, can you call the roll?
Fiorentino?
Aye.
Lamarca?
Aye.
McNicholas?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Scarpino? Aye. Stevens?
Nay.
Zettler?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Okay. And then, as I understand, we now have everyone but our 4th and 5th graders in school at some point. So we probably want to do something with our 4th and 5th graders. Okay, so we made the motion for K through 3 as being a priority for now. I would make a motion for 4, 5 to come back no later than second semester, but to leave the discretion up to Mr. Hyde and how it works with your planning.
So, Madam President, if I'm just through the chair, if I may,
Please.
make sure. Does that give me the liberty to accelerate that timeline, if it's feasible?
So I say yes, but I don't know what everybody else, based on comments from before, they were all kind of, no, let's not.
I just want to make sure that where my parameters are, because I don't want to try to accelerate the timeline, because I have a feeling.
Maybe what I will do is I will ask someone who was not in favor of them coming back right away to formulate a motion for the 4th and 5th graders.
Yes, ma'am.
So your 13.3.5 was approval of the return of K through 3 hybrid learning with a remote option, plan at the discretion of administration.
Correct.
Now you're doing approval of the return for grades 4 through 5.
And we need to fill in the blank.
Correct.
where the question came about was the way it was phrased was no later than the start of the second semester in January, and that's why I sought clarification. I apologize. So if that was not your intent, then I misunderstood.
No, that was my intent, but that was not what I had been hearing from fellow board members prior. Prior, they were saying, no, we're not ready to bring students back.
From some board members.
Some board members,
Because
correct.
I don't understand why we're splitting from third to fourth grade if we're in agreement that first through third can be ready in October.
Because the motion for first through third is for them to
Understand.
start coming back sooner than later.
But we're coming back to this, so we have an opportunity to say, keep that same cohort together, which is always together in our district.
Except that we already voted down having them come back. Mr. Stevens.
I would say no to your question, Mr. Hyde. It does not give you the option to bring them back earlier if necessary. But we call special board meetings, situations change. If you feel that need, I think you should call us together and make that recommendation.
Yes, sir.
But I don't want to backdoor ignoring the motions that we have failed tonight.
And I am not trying to do that. That's
I understand,
why
but I want to be clear that
Right.
I
So-
want to get kids back to school as soon as possible.
So-
If you feel there's an option that we can do that, and you want to call us together, by all means do that, and we will all listen. But I don't want to backdoor ignoring the motions that have failed.
No, and I don't want the impression to be that I am trying to do that, which is why I said, no, I'm fine with that, but others were not. So how do you feel about this if it was a motion to bring fourth and fifth graders back second semester?
That's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to make the motion to,
I will still vote no for the same reasons, but that makes more sense.
but then, okay.
I guess the question then is, instead of what? Instead of not ever having them come back?
Instead of nothing, right? So right
Okay.
now, we've got K through 3 coming back. We've got middle school and high school coming back second semester. We've got fourth and fifth graders that are going to be remote until we come up with something. So to have them come back second semester, and I would add how we did with, do we need to have option one? I would say with the same process, schedule, option that our K through 3 are coming back sooner. Tack on fourth and fifth starting second semester.
Wouldn't it be easier if you just had one motion that says the board's goal is to get all kids back in school the second semester under the plans outlined if possible, and we would review the data? That's really what we're trying to do here, if possible.
Except,
Can I make a comment?
who said they wanted to make a comment?
Me, Nancy.
I'm sorry, I'm looking around. Like, where did that voice come from? Yes.
Okay, it's, my understanding is the reason that we did what we did with K through 3 is there was specific issues that we weigh, you always weigh the risks and the benefits. And the risk in this case was that this is a group of children that would be seriously falling behind if they did not get the instruction that they needed.
Yes.
There was still a remote option for the parents.
Yes.
I see fourth and fifth closer as far as educational needs with middle school than I do with the K through 3. So I would vote to have them be treated like the middle school where we'll bring them back second semester.
Second semester.
Because I still have I have the same concerns scientifically and medically for all our kids, but I know that there are different groups of kids who have needs that are not typical of your average student.
What I would add further on that before any motion is made is by second semester, our K through 3 are going to be back in school. And they're going to be back in school on some plan, some hybrid. I think fourth and fifth should be coming back to school on whatever that plan is that is established for K through 3.
With me, it's not a matter of the plan as much as it is a matter of the timing on that, for the same reasons I just stated.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is grades 4, 5 come back to school second semester with the hybrid option, the same schedule that Mr. Hyde will have the K-3 students on, getting K-3 students in sooner, 4th and 5th coming back with the rest of our students at second semester. Is that, and Mr. Hyde, does that make sense to you?
That is the motion. I mean, yeah.
We don't have a motion yet. We're still discussing what the motion would be.
It does make sense to me. Again, mine was simply a timeline clarification, because if the demand were there and the ability were there,
And to Mr. Stevens' point,
I could return to the
you
board.
could come back sooner and say, hey, this is working great for K-3. We're ready to blend it in 4-5. Data shows it's good timing. This is what we want to
Yes,
do.
ma'am.
Does that create chaos for you, or okay, so.
Ma'am, chaos has existed since last March. We're thriving in it at this point.
I don't want to add more. So from what I understand, I will make a motion to bring back 4th and 5th graders second semester in the hybrid fashion for K through 3 that will be established at Mr. Hyde's discretion. And if Mr. Hyde feels that we should be bringing them back to school prior to second semester, he will so notify the board and we will vote on it earlier.
I second.
Any discussion? Okay, Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
That was your concern.
I don't understand why we have to vote on it tonight instead of.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, did you have a comment?
No. I was responding to my colleague here.
Mr. Fiorentino, did you have a question? Sorry?
I do not.
Okay, Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Miller,
Aye.
Lamarca,
Aye.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
McNicholas,
Aye.
Zettler,
Aye.
Stevens.
Only being true to my purpose is, I think we don't need to be voting on this tonight versus December. I vote no.
Scarpino, aye. Motion passes 6-1.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to recap so that we have clarification. Kindergarten through third grade students, Mr. Hyde will start working on implementing a plan to bring them back sooner than later. 4th, 5th, 6th through high school will be coming back second semester. Middle school, high school students will be coming back second semester per the option that was provided in the parent survey and what administration has recommended. 4th and 5th grades will come back in the same manner as K through 3. What did I forget? Second semester. Second semester. For 4th and 5th. Yes, 4th and 5th coming back second semester. If Mr. Hyde feels that he can bring them back sooner, or we're in phase 5, come back to us. If we are in phase 3, everything hits fan, we're back at home. Everybody. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And for
And I
everyone,
apologize to all those that are listening or watching that are confused.
we will send a clarification out immediately first thing tomorrow morning to all of our families and staff so that they understand exactly where we landed this evening.
Yes, so when you're asking, did we pass option 1, 2, or 3, the answer is yes, and the answer is no.
The answer is no.
No.
But there were new options. Yeah, there were new options created.
It may be 1 or 2 because it's
That is
now, we just tossed it back to Mr. Hyde to make that decision.
Yes, ma'am.
But high school, middle school, 4th and 5th grade coming back second semester. Okay.
So, just a question
Yes.
about just maybe a subgroup. So in special education, as a high schooler, where will they be at? Will they follow more of the special education route and we try to get them back sooner? Or are they going to follow what the board just discussed, that it will be second semester?
Because there hasn't been a simple answer this evening. The answer is both. If a student has an IEP, a 504, or is identified as an English language learner,
Okay.
and that student currently is academically fragile, meaning they're failing multiple classes,
Right.
I will absolutely look to start reintegrating those students to some capacity now.
Okay, so there's an opportunity for that group of
Absolutely.
students, no matter what grade they are.
Absolutely. But we have countless students who have an IEP, a 504, or who are English language learners who are academically successful. Much credit to Ms. Nacky and her amazing team of dedicated staff. They do very well. So for those students, unless there's a specified need, unless their IEP changes, modifications, those types of things, I would not assume or just say because you have an IEP, you must come for that support. I think we need to be targeted and very intentional in how we do that and strategic so we can minimize numbers and we can maximize the efficiencies.
So those parents will work through the normal route with Ms. Nacky and others to discuss their child.
That is
depending on
correct.
where they fall.
The team began pulling data today.
Okay.
On those students. We already have that file, and we will update it again at the end of the quarter, but I wanted the preliminary DNF reports based off midterm grades, so we could start to quickly identify those students.
Thank you.
And I also want to point out, keep in mind all of the other options or topics that Mr. Hyde mentioned that his team is looking into, the different locations, the satellites, the groupings. None of that stops. That's going to continue on. And he may come back to us with additional modifications or options. I think, again, for me, the important part is we've made a commitment of doing in-person, bringing students back, and giving a timeline for when that's going to happen. And we have the matrix, the measurements on whether or not we're going to go back, forward, or stay the course. Yes, Dr. Scarpino.
I think for those individuals that are present and those that are watching, this is a teachable moment for all of you. We as a board do not have the option to call one another to discuss matters like this because that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. You actually witnessed this evening the first time we have had this dialogue. And so I understand how people are thinking, my gosh, what in the world are they doing? They're doing this and that. We haven't had an opportunity. So to actually have this discussion tonight, this is the first time. So when you heard my fellow board members ask questions and make comments, it's the first time for everyone to say that. So this, I want to say this was a very good discussion. It really was. It was fruitful, and look at what we did. So, and Mr. Hyde, I want to say thank you because your clarification, you answered everyone. This was a very respectful discussion and disagreement and conversation. So this was good, and it's a teachable moment for everyone. This was good. It really was. So thank you very much.
I would like to say that I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Scarpino, and whether you're on the winning or the losing side of a vote is irrelevant.
Correct.
It's that we respect each other's opinion, and we all got on board with whatever the majority vote is. So, yes. And Mr. Hyde, you are appreciated, believe it or not.
And I would.
Believe it or not.
Shaking his head.
And ergo, that is the teachable moment. There is patience and laughter in controversy.
That's right.
So it can be done. And thank you all. Any other board discussion items? We are now on my last agenda. Item number 14, any board finance or construction and facility oversight committee updates?
No. Well, we voted on everything tonight. We have a meeting in 2 weeks, Susan? That's okay. Don't worry about it. Our meeting is coming up in October. 13th.
Okay.
There you go.
No.
Susan, just stop there.
Rubbing salt in the wound.
We have the renaming of our October district holiday to Indigenous People Day, and I think that was already addressed previously, if anyone had any additional comments on that. Okay, and then I'm going to ask if any board members had any final comments, anything else to state? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. No, I'm not.